They'll be able to be like, see, it's the toxic femininity. It's the women. See, I told you I could blame women for my problems. I knew it.
In order to be in solidarity with all of our healing, we must all heal our relationship with the masculine, all the way down into the deep, tender wounds of our childhood. Healthy masculinity is emotionally fluent, palpably safe, and peaceful. We must all learn to love and be attracted to the men who are embodying those qualities.
Ruby, you don't like that? I'll play it again for everyone. It's smart. It's basically explaining how women uphold the patriarchy as well, but women also uphold a version of masculinity that is so ingrained that stops them from doing the work to kind of process what that means. But yes, it's bell hooks. He's very well spoken. I guarantee you he is in a forest dressed in a traditionally masculine kind of setting in order to resonate with his target audience, would be my guess. I mean, obviously I think that's who he is as well, but I'm gonna play it again. Just listen, it's really good. Basically what he's saying is don't fall prey and listen to women who basically spouting red pill ideology.
What we did is we killed the masculine. We're headed towards a world where men have no value.
When I was a younger man, I would have loved this clip, so I wanted to take a second and speak to my 16-year-old self. Pretty much all of us are raised by and around wounded men. Some more wounded, some less. The wounds that these men carry are similar and pretty well understood at this point. Emotional dissociation, isolation, identification with and glorification of violence, etc. These wounds are so ubiquitous that we are taught to think that the manifestations of these wounds is masculinity. We initially learn what masculinity is from the men around us and their impacts. And because we learn this from birth, we learn it.
Keeping in mind that historically wounded men, or men who have experienced different sociological landscapes to the one in which we exist now and have found ways to cope with those, including like war and things like that. The fact that their fathers weren't actual fathers, women were expected to do all of the parenting. And so men for a very long time have grown up and had role models and depictions of masculinity that are actually wounded manifestations of what masculinity is. Basically, we learn to identify men by their flaws, which is whatever, and call it masculinity, basically. Doesn't get into why pretty much every man is wounded in some way, but well, TikTok length. No, but that's it. It's just historically wounded masculinity. In that, right, don't talk about your feelings. Keep it all down. You have to go off to war. Don't talk about your mental health problems because you need to be a man. You need to provide. You need to be able to go to work every day. Keep those feelings down, right? Because women do all of the feelings. You just have to bring in a paycheck, okay?
Identification with and glorification of violence, etc. These wounds are so ubiquitous that we are taught to think that the manifestations of these wounds is masculinity. We initially learn what masculinity is.
Like the idea that a propensity to violence or like dealing with something with anger and violence is a masculine trait is not necessarily inherent to men, or doesn't have to be inherent to men. It is clearly a societal problem, and we need to address it on an individual level as well as on a societal level. Anyway, the point is,
because we learn this from birth, we learn it on every layer of our being, from the intellectual all the way down to our deepest subconscious emotional layers. Noteworthy that we all learn this, not just men. The work of healing our relationship with the masculine requires that we...
That's the point as well, right? So even women who are raised by women who experience the wounded masculine, or men who exist in whatever that is, pass that along as well. So women unknowingly uphold these standards of masculinity as well. What that looks like is very different. At a certain point, talking about your fears or what is bothering you helps no one. You should be able to openly process things that you are going through. But I do think that it can't be all you do with the people around you, because otherwise it doesn't work out very well. Like, you're kind of half right, but I don't think you're coming from the right place, because everybody needs to be able to talk about the things that they are going through in the way that we have to process these things. Because if you shove all of those things down, they don't just disappear from your brain. That's how you get PTSD. It's how you get all sorts of really, really bad mental health outcomes.
Unlearn these lifelong lessons equating masculinity with the cultural expressions of woundedness from men. For many of us who undertake this work of unlearning in order to heal, we first understand these patterns on an intellectual level. We realize that men are not well, we're causing harm, and we construct whatever narrative is socio-politically accessible to us to explain that awareness. Maybe that's red pill, maybe that's feminism. Both give us a framework in order to explain that men are not okay and are causing harm. For many of us, that intellectual layer of understanding is also where we stop. For everyone in the red pill community, that's where they stop.
By the way, I think this is like relevant to everybody because I know even me, some things I know intellectually, I do not necessarily do perfectly in my own life, but I guess we're all on a path of learning. But this is the thing, you can intellectually know that something and then still not act in a way that backs up your intellectual knowledge surrounding these things.
Jokes about progressive guys who talk about feminism but don't do the dishes or care if their partner comes originate. But again, this work of healing our relationship with the masculine is not just men's. Women and trans folk also fall prey to this trap. Bell Hooks describes in detail how women often want men to be more emotionally communicative, but then as soon as men are emotionally communicative or vulnerable, those
right? That is a very clear way women uphold this experience of masculinity for men. We sit here and we ask for emotional communication, and as soon as that happens, women don't know what to do with that because that's not something that they've been programmed to be attracted to. So they sit there and they're like, what's that? I'm confused. So it's about, for women, it's about understanding if you're encouraging that in your like male friends or partners, it's also creating the space for that at the same time, not just intellectually, but also in the responses that you give a person.
The same women feel less attracted to those men, don't feel safe with them. She says that these women have only healed their relationship with the masculine intellectually. Their deep inner child still thinks that men should be emotionally dangerous and distant. So when men don't show up in those ways, these women don't experience them as masculine anymore. Woman in this clip says as much. She says women are not attracted to emotionally mature men. She has intellectualized her own emotional response to her residual mental construct of men as inherently violent or emotionally distant.
I'm working on it, Cherie. I'm trying to make it consumable.
And now she's using her platform to propagate that wildly harmful, deeply mistaken concept of what a man is. Like Tate and Peterson, she's locking masculinity into a tiny, fragile box. And she's projecting her wounded experience and sense of masculinity onto all masculinity and rewriting history in order to justify that projection to avoid looking at that wound. All day, men ask me to talk about toxic femininity. I don't, because when men bring this up, it's always as a shield to avoid looking at the work we have to do. It's a red herring at best and a dog whistle. But insofar as I believe in toxic femininity, it's this type of narrative. Guys, I know this rhetoric sounds good, feels good to hear, but the reason it feels good is that it excuses us from the work of actually healing and learning to love ourselves. Women like this are not friends to masculinity, and this woman's words are toxic. In the same way that men must heal beyond the intellectual to be healthy and whole, in order to be in solidarity with all of our healing, we must all heal our relationship with the masculine, all the way down into the deep, tender wounds of our childhood. Healthy masculinity is emotionally fluent, palpably safe, and peaceful. We must all learn to love and be attracted to the men who are embodying those qualities.
In the way that toxic femininity is upholding toxic masculinity, I do think that that is a thing, right? It's just a woman's experience of the patriarchy through like the masculine lens of femininity and then expecting that to be upheld by men. I think we can talk about it, especially in a chat like this where nuance is available, but it is a difficult conversation to have because most of the time what will happen is that like people will be looking for someone to blame for whatever situation they find themselves in their lives, and they'll be able to be like, see, it's the toxic femininity, it's the women. And it doesn't come out as the nuanced take that this is. It comes out as in, see, I told you I could blame women for my problems. I knew it. And that's where it gets a bit iffy.